Taoiseach, I made most of the points that I want to about the Brexit situation in the earlier engagement, but just to briefly summarise, I think that it is a very welcome, long overdue development that Theresa May has moved away from trying to engage with or have reason prevail with the headbangers of the Tory right, like Boris Johnson, Rees-Mogg and the ERG. These people are at worst driven by their own sort of personal ambitions and by really rotten sort of nostalgia for the imperial greatness, as they would imagine it, of Britain, Little Englanderism and xenophobia, and never were likely to listen to reason. So the fact that she has started to engage with Jeremy Corbyn, notwithstanding the tendency of people both here and in Britain to malign Mr Corbyn for his left-wing views, the truth is that that engagement actually offers up the possibility that a deal might be done, because Corbyn does not want a race to the bottom style Brexit of the sort that the Tory right want. And it is noteworthy that in his engagement with Theresa May, for him the issues that are being raised are ones that actually really matter to British people, and I think to people right across Europe, things like workers' rights and health and safety standards and so on. And he's saying clearly that he wants to look at a deal that would not involve undermining those kind of standards. And indeed, I think in many areas, people with left-wing politics of Corbyn's sort is precisely about trying to raise standards. In terms of workers' rights, in terms of our environmental ambitions, in terms of opposing militarism and promoting an equality and progressive agenda. And I think in that kind of context, these things would be quite alien to Theresa May and of course will make her reluctant to do a deal with Mr Corbyn, but indeed it does offer some glimmer of hope. But probably the best hope would be a general election in Britain that removed the Tories and opened the way for a left-wing government with politics of the sort that Jeremy Corbyn is articulating. The only other point I would make is that I do think it is welcome that the sort of clear message that has come from here to Europe, that under no circumstances and for whatever reason can a hard border on the border of Ireland be considered, seems to be having some impact, and I just hope that we can trust our European counterparts in the event, which we hope won't come to pass, of a no deal. And that they will not intend to put pressure on us to impose border infrastructure between the north and south, something that should be hotly resisted if there's any attempt to do it. But certainly it would seem that the message, at least from here, is clear in that regard. I want to move on to some other issues, though, Taoiseach, which probably you won't have much time to discuss at the European Council, but I think it would be remiss not to mention, given the day that's in it, and that is the Israeli general elections. And here, I said this to you earlier on, you know, it is a very positive thing for Angela Merkel to come here and say that the experience of the Berlin Wall, of the division of East Germany, the bitter experience, which ended with the wall being pulled down in 1989, you know, led her to somewhat empathise with our concerns and opposition to a hard border north and south. That's a positive development. But Europe is failing to take the same attitude when it comes to the walls and the borders brutally imposed by Israel, and in particular by the Netanyahu government, on the Palestinian people. We are seeing really the rottenness of Israeli politics manifest in a particularly repugnant way in the last few weeks, the last few months. The talk by Netanyahu of annexing further illegal settlements on Palestinian territory follows the acceptance by the United States of the annexation of the Golan Heights. All of these things completely fly in the face of international law, completely. And yet, the European Union does nothing about it. I had an Israeli lawyer come into me in my clinic in the last week or two, detailing, he represents Palestinian children who are locked up. And he explained in detail, and this is an Israeli lawyer, in detail how an apartheid legal system operates. I don't know why you're smirking. An apartheid legal system applies to children, where Palestinian children almost always are arrested in and around areas of illegal Israeli settlements, are arrested in the middle of the night, tied with plastic ties, blindfolded. Their parents aren't allowed to come with them. They're dragged into cells, interrogated under military law, right? And literally in the same towns and areas, Israelis who might be accused of the same crimes are brought to civil courts where none of that sort of mistreatment and abuse of children is allowed. It's illegal to do that to an Israeli child, but it is done every single day to Palestinian children because literally a different set of laws applies to Palestinian children than to Israeli children, even though they live in the same place. Now that is the definition of apartheid. The definition of apartheid. And it's absolutely appalling what is being done. Thousands of Palestinian children will be arrested every year. Hundreds at any one point are in prison. And those children, this Israeli lawyer explained how those children are marked forever by that experience. They are damaged and traumatized forever. And nothing is being done about it. Similarly, with adult prisoners, on Sunday, a Palestinian hunger strike commenced because Palestinian prisoners, 30 initially going on hunger strike, refusing food and water, is going to escalate to 1,500. Why? Because conditions in Israeli prisons, in particular Ramon prison in the Negev, are deteriorating and are so appalling and obnoxious that the Palestinians simply can't take it anymore. The 1,800, according to human rights groups, 1,800 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prisons are very seriously ill and are not getting the medical treatment they need. Hundreds more have chronic illnesses and very severe, in some cases life-threatening illnesses. And this is just going on under the noses of the international community and nothing is done. I mean, Israel even really sticks two fingers up to Europe when it comes to Europe putting money into projects in Gaza and in the West Bank, and then the Israelis go and just blow it up. They blow up projects that are put together or funded with European money, and Europe does nothing. Right? So I just think, given the day that is in it, Minister, and I welcome the fact, I believe you mentioned you put out a statement yesterday, but it's just not good enough, is it? Because countries like Germany, and particularly Merkel, have a hands-off attitude towards what Israel is doing to the Palestinians and don't want to take any action. We continue to give preferred trading status to Israel under the Euromed Association Agreement, and that agreement contains human rights clauses, which mean that agreement should be suspended, but we do nothing about it. So when are there going to be sanctions over the systematic, ongoing, unacceptable human rights abuses, including, most horribly, if you like, the systematic abuses of children's rights, of young kids who are being treated in the most brutal fashion because, in the case of Ahad Tamimi, she protests over the fact that a family relative of hers is shot and permanently damaged through the skull by an Israeli soldier, and she protests and then ends up in prison, treated in the same way that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other young children are being treated by the Israelis. So I would appeal to you, Taoiseach, to do something about that and demand that finally Europe shows a bit of moral backbone and imposes some real sanctions on Israel for its systematic, ongoing, brutal suppression of human and civil rights in Palestine.